Retro Kevo back again. Now, got a little review today of a DVD. It came in the post just over Christmas. Now, I'm a great supporter of Gracious Films. Those who don't know, they're a company. They make documentaries, Blu-rays about the stuff from the old days of home computing. They did the tremendous Rubber Keyed Wonder, From Bedrooms to Billions. If you can watch those movies, they are really, really, really good stuff. I've even got the soundtrack somewhere. There it is, of the Rubber Keyed Wonder, because, you know, I absolutely love that stuff. It's very nostalgic. But on to the review. Now, this arrived over Christmas. It was like an extra Christmas present. As with the thumbnail, Commodore 64 Classic Game Insights Volume 1. Now, I've already watched this twice because I really love these documentaries. As I say, Gracious Films do a lovely job, and what they do with this one was, when you put the DVD in, it's not like a documentary, it's got a start, middle and end. You put the DVD in and you get the menu, and the menu is just the title of video games. Now, these are the video games that are there. I'll read them out for you. We've got Impossible Mission, Paradroid, Uridium, Maniac Mansion, Dropzone, Great, Giana Sisters or Giana Sisters, Trailblazer and Cosmic Causeway, Rambo First Blood Part 2, Aliens, Sacred Armour, Antiriad, Parallax, Kickstarter 1 and 2, Crazy Comets and Mega Apocalypse and Super Pipeline and Bozo's Night Out. So what you do is you sort of pick whichever game you want to watch about, and you will see a documentary on the making of that game. Now, some of them are quite short, maybe sort of 5-10 minutes, and some are quite long. The one on Paradroid is a really in-depth look at that game. Now, I'll show a bit of footage here and there of the games because, as I say, I'm not going to show any of the interviews or anything because that would be copyright and not really my place to do that. But as I said, you'll see a few little of the games. I've got some notes. You'll have to bear with me because I'm not a worker for the BBC with some sort of skills or any other sort of TV platform that can spend hours remembering all that stuff without writing it down. So you'll have to bear with me with a few notes. But as I said, Paradroid. They'd speak to the guys who did Paradroids. Andrew Braybrook. He also did Uridium, which it's another fantastic game. But it really goes into the depth of what these guys did back in the day to make these games. Now, as I said about the nostalgia, it's really, really great to see the old photographs, the sort of interviews with these guys of how it was back in the day when they were making these games. It was completely different times. It's not like today where corporates really control everything to do with games, and obviously there are independents, but it's extremely difficult for independents in gaming wise these days, and even those are obviously quite big. They weren't just some guy writing a computer program at home as it was with these games on the Commodore 64. But Paradroid, some of the stuff they were talking about, stuff like the magazines. I've said before when I spoke about the Rubber Keyed Wonder documentary, the magazines, you know, these game makers lived or died by the magazines. If, for example, Zap64 gave you a good review, you know what, you were quids in. If they gave you 90% plus, you know, your game would sell well. If they gave you a poor review, that was it. You know, unbelievable. Your game would probably bomb before it even had a chance. But yeah, Andrew Braybrook made Paradroid, and it's basically a robot, you know, going around a ship. Now, I'd never played this. This is the thing about myself and the Commodore 64. I had a friend, great friend, who had the Commodore 64 back in the day. I had the ZX Spectrum, and I'd go around his house and I'd see the games on the Commodore 64, and, you know, it was fantastic. But I didn't get one. I picked up my Commodore 64 maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, 6 years ago. So it's not a massive nostalgia thing as in I played the games back in the day and I'm playing them now. But personally, I love playing the games for the first time, or maybe having seen them back in the day but not played them. And, you know, it's a great rush for me to play these games now. So this is why I love these documentaries so much, just seeing how these games were developed. But yeah, Paradroid, you know, the things these guys had to battle with when the guys made Paradroid, they were looking for the cover of the game itself. The people who ever made the cover did a sort of really sort of quite a babyish cover for the game itself, and they just had to live with it. But what happened is those great people at Zap64, they did an issue of the magazine and they did a fantastic drawing of one of the robots, how they saw it, and that's how the software writers saw it for the robots in Paradroid. And this was a great thing for Andrew Braybrook and those people behind Paradroid. But it was really, really brilliant. And the other thing is the influences. You find out on these documentaries the influences people had. Now, Andrew Braybrook, he was influenced by the cover of a Black Sabbath album and, you know, the Robots of Death in Doctor Who on BBC. So it's really fascinating to find out how, you know, these things come about. So I'm not going to go on about every game because we'll be here all day, and, you know, it's much better to watch the Blu-ray itself, actually. But, you know, this is what I find fascinating. The other one was Parallax. Now, you know, Martin Galway obviously did the music of Parallax, but when you watch the story of that one, it's just these guys, they wrote this game Parallax, and, you know, they ended up getting the game somehow to Ocean. And these two lads, they went in to, you know, they're just called in with the boss of Ocean. And he says it's quite an intimidating thing to do when you're 16, 17 years old. And basically, they lay the sort of lads a bit of contract down on the table and say, there you are, lads, £1,000 up front. And you get £5,000 on top of that, you know, once the game is being marketed and stuff. And these two young lads, it's like from being, you know, literally at school to next minute sitting in an office, Ocean Software, it's like mind-blowing. And they signed the contract, obviously, without a thought. And as the guy says in the Blu-ray, he says, God, looking back, you know, there was no sort of royalties for how much the game sold or anything. He just took that wad of money there and then, and probably would have got more if they'd done the other way. And he said they went home on the train. Back then you could smoke on trains. And he said they got themselves cigars and they were sort of had steak on the train and they felt like kings. But they said, even though they probably lost out, they said, it was a fantastic feeling. And in this documentary, or the little documentaries of each game, you hear so much of this. You see photographs of these young lads back in the day. And, you know, and the other thing about Parallax is, you know, Martin Galway was seen as a god of music, along with Rob Hubbard. And, you know, they suddenly were told that, you know, Martin Galway was going to do the music for Parallax. And they go down there, see Martin Galway. Martin Galway puts the lights down and he plays this epic music, as you know, from Parallax. To these young lads, and they said their jaws dropped, just sort of mind blown when you're sort of 17, you're sitting next to Martin Galway and he's done the music for your game. But, you know, can you imagine what it was like? And as a lot of the guys said in this Blu-ray, it wouldn't happen like that now. You know, you're going from sitting in your bedroom to sitting in an office and your game's going to come out within a matter of weeks. It's unbelievable. But there is so much, and it's like that Antiriad game. Those lads were talking about, you know, they worked in the sort of basement of what's the name of the cinema? Scala Cinema in King's Cross. And there's 12 lads together working on games. Can you imagine right in the heart of King's Cross? Now, King's Cross back in the 80s, you know, took your life in your own hands when you went out there. But they were working on Antiriad, and, you know, they were working till late into the night. Every night they'd go for a curry and beers afterwards. And one of the lads was saying he went home and his dad was saying, God, you look wrecked and everything. And he was just saying, well, it was just what they did. Spent the hours working on screen till late into the night, you know, into having curries. And again, those lads said it was some of the best times of their lives. And this is what I think is the best thing about these documentaries, is it just is the huge nostalgia for me anyway. It's the nostalgia, you know. They show the sort of pictures of the lads sat there and they talk to these programmers, and it's just how the feelings were back in the day and how amazing it was to them to look back at those times. And there's numerous stuff on this DVD about all these different games. Got more notes. Like the one I thought was fantastic is Rambo. You know, when how Rambo came about, it's like Martin Galway again did the music, and it was like a competition. As Commando had obviously come out, and that Commando had no link to the Arnold Schwarzenegger film. It was Commando the arcade machine, and Martin Galway found out Rob Hubbard was doing the music, and it was like, oh my God, like, you know, the arch nemesis, your enemy in competition of music writing, was going to do the music for Commando. And Martin Galway felt he had to sort of, up the ante right up there. And he was saying that obviously the documentary, that he had a sort of half-finished sort of version of Rambo, and he'd gone away on holiday and he'd come back and they'd moved all his equipment from where the offices he worked, and he had to put it all back together. But there it was, and he played a little bit of this Rambo, and then you know, he started working on the score, and you know, it was really seen as a bit like the sort of, if you think about the film competition stuff between Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was a bit like that in the sort of the music stakes of the Commodore 64. So it was Martin Galway versus Rob Hubbard, and they're probably great friends now, and I suspect, and they look back, they probably were at a time when they met. But yeah, it's just finding out how these things came about, and you know, and Martin Galway, he mentions about how what made his day is when this, I think it was Zap64 reviewed both games, Commando and Rambo 2, First Blood Part 2 rather, how Martin Galway's Rambo 2 just nicked it. I think got 5 out of 5 for music sound, and Commando got 4, and he said it made his day. And I don't want to go into too much detail of each individual sort of game on the documentary, but there's just so many little stories. It's a bit like, you know, the Crazy Comets and Mega Apocalypse. It's again, this time Rob Hubbard. Absolutely quality music that he came up with. And the guy was talking about Simon Nicol, and he wrote the game, and it's great again hearing him talk about the creation of these games. And what he did is, Rob Hubbard is on obviously talking as well, and he was saying that Simon Nicol gave him, you know, he said, Rob Hubbard said, what sort of music do you want? And Simon says, I want it like Jimi Hendrix, man, to Jimi Hendrix. Rob Hubbard's sort of thinking, laughing to himself. But then he comes up with the music that was in Crazy Comets and Mega Apocalypse, and it's mind-blowing stuff. Now, I forgot to mention at the start. Now, at the end, I'm going to, because music is such a big thing on the Commodore 64, I'm going to play some of the music. I'm going to put the music for, what will we put? We'll put Rambo, obviously Rambo 2, and Mega Apocalypse, which is obviously the same sort of music, just a different version of Crazy Comets. And I think we'll stick that at the end, because then maybe Parallax will have a look and see how I do for getting the music sort of captured from the Commodore 64. But yeah, the music obviously huge with the SID chip. It was a fantastic music maker compared to, say, the Spectrum. And I love the Spectrum. The Spectrum is always my number one, but the Commodore 64 was different level. And the other thing, Maniac Mansion as well. I haven't played a lot of these games. This is the great thing. This is why I love these documentaries as well, because you find out about stuff, you know, because I wasn't there playing all the games back in the day, I can find them now and play them. And obviously Maniac Mansion was made, you know, by Lucasfilm. Now, you'd think Lucasfilm, Star Wars obviously, but the lads, again, they talk about how, you know, George Lucas had obviously, he'd moved on the rights to a lot of the games already to the likes of Atari, the Star Wars ones I'm talking about. So this is why those at Lucasfilm making games had to think of different ideas. Now, one of their films, it's not on this, one of their games rather, it's not on the DVD here, but Rescue on Fractors, so I used to love that game. But Maniac Mansion obviously was, and the guy was talking about how, you know, he loved text adventure games, and on Maniac Mansion, you know, they pushed it further. He put it where you had the words at the bottom and you could click on those, click on the animation, and you could move the adventure along a lot quicker, if you like, and that was sort of quite groundbreaking at the time, you know. So, but it was quite strange to find out, like, Lucasfilm, you know, game writers didn't have any access to writing games for Star Wars, but there's so many bits of information like that on this film. Aliens as well, it covers Aliens, and they talked to the guys who did Aliens, and really it was one of the first games where, even though it's 2D, they gave an aspect of 3D where you sort of, you know, moved around the ship and an alien would come towards you, but it was more like you get in first-person shooters now, where you stand in the centre of a room, if you like. But that was one of the first times it had been done on a 2D sort of, you know, image, but it looked 3D. But so there's so much stuff, and I've talked about Paradroid, but yeah, a couple more. And then we go to you know, the game, Epic's game, Impossible Mission. The guy talks about how that came about, and the other thing it comes across, there was so much sort of nicking of ideas back then, and nobody thought much of it. They thought, oh, you know, it's like Kickstart. You know, that game, they sort of used the music from the television show. It just used it. I don't think they asked. The guy says they sort of just nicked it, but I mean, it's quite nice in a way, because nobody was like, oh, I'm going to sue you. You know, I'm going to sue you, and you're using that music. It just sort of happened back then. But those guys on Kickstart talk about how that sort of stuff happened. And also the other thing, yeah, as I said, Impossible Mission. You know, the guy talks about the influences as Epic's games, and he was saying, like, you know, he saw war games. And he said that the war games gave him the idea of sort of getting into a base and sort of like a mission, like an adventure. And even the sort of ball that turns up in that game, he said that idea came from The Prisoner. you know, the 60s show, which, you know, is even too old for me. I remember catching it on a Saturday morning. It would have been reruns in the sort of 70s, I suppose. But it's really amazing to hear how all these ideas came about. And the other thing I really enjoyed watching is the task set games, like Super Pipeline. Never heard of these games. And this was right at the start of the Commodore 64 game programming. And you're talking to these guys who are right at the start. The guy talks through how that guy was really on the ball, really, because his idea was the games would not have any bugs, you know, because a lot of the games on the ZX Spectrum Commodore 64, you would have problems with bugs, but he sort of, you know, marketed his games that there were no bugs. So they'd run smoothly every time. So when they were making the copies of the games to send out, they test every one, you know, so they worked. And it's just hearing these fascinating stories through these games. So as I said, I'm not going to go through every game, but I'm going to wrap it up in a way because I just wanted to get over what a great job they do with the feeling of nostalgia. Every now and then they show photographs and pictures from back in the day, and they add sort of like ambient music just for a little while, like 20-30 seconds, but it's those moments that really draw on me personally anyway, of this nostalgic feeling of how it was in the early 80s there, mid 80s really. But they do a really good job. So those at Gracious Films, you know, they obviously have honed their trade and it's first class stuff. Now, what's really good is it came up on Kickstarter the other day. They're actually going to do a sort of a Blu-ray documentary all about the whole creation of the Commodore 64. Now, if it's anything like the Rubber Key Wonder, it would be brilliant. Now, so, you know, they put a thing for notification. And oh, listen, I'll absolutely certainly be backing that, as will a lot of people. So, you know, I'm really looking forward to that coming out. You know, it'll probably be obviously quite a while. It's got to be made. But they get the best interviews. They interview the people who create these things, who are there at the time. And for me, that's what makes these documentaries so good. So, yes, that's my little look. Now, I'm going to go on to some music in a minute. I won't talk at the end. I'll say my goodbyes now, and then there'll be some music from the Commodore 64 games. I'll put them in the title actually at the bottom, so if there's any you want to listen to specifically, you can speed along and listen to them. But that was my little review, Commodore 64 Classic Game Insights Volume 1. Yeah, you know, as I said, I'll put the link below, and I think they're still available. And you know what? You know, it's your money, and obviously spend your money on what you like, but it's £30 really well spent. I've watched it twice already. I can't help putting it on and just watching through some of the games because it's just really fascinating stuff. Anyway, that's my short review of that DVD, and I hope you're all doing well. Christmas is sort of past now. I hope you all had a good Christmas, New Year, etc. And I'll be back with another video soon. Enjoy the Commodore 64 music. Take care. Bye.